The blood on Lily Thorne's palms had dried to a rust-brown crust by the time she noticed the mill owner shortchanging her again. And this time, she would not stay silent no matter what it cost her. She stood in the small office attached to the lumber mill, her calloused hands gripping the meager coins that represented 2 weeks of back-breaking labor. Around her, the sounds of saws cutting through timber and men shouting instructions created a constant roar that had become as familiar as her own heartbeat. Tascosa, Texas in 1878 was a town built on cattle and timber, and the railroad had brought both opportunity and exploitation in equal measure. "Mr. Hutchins," Lily said, her voice steady despite the anger building in her chest, "this is $8. You pay the men $16 for the same work." Samuel Hutchins barely looked up from his ledger, his thin mustache twitching as he made another notation. He was a slight man with calculating eyes and fingers permanently stained with ink. "You get what you are due, Miss Thorne. Women do not require the same wages as men. You have no family to support." "I support myself," Lily countered, stepping closer to his desk. "I load the same timber, operate the same equipment, and work the same hours. My sweat and blood are worth the same as any man's here." Hutchins finally lifted his gaze, his expression hardening. "If you are dissatisfied with your compensation, there are plenty of others who would be grateful for the opportunity. Perhaps you should seek employment more suitable to your sex." Lily wanted to throw the coins in his smug face, but she needed this job. She had come to Tascosa 6 months ago after her father died, leaving her with nothing but debts and the clothes on her back. The mill was the only place that would hire a woman for physical labor, even if they paid her half what they paid the men. She had a room in a boarding house that cost $4 a week, and food for another $2. These $8 would leave her with $2 for everything else, including the new boots she desperately needed before winter arrived. She turned and walked out of the office, her jaw clenched so tight it ached. The autumn sun hung low in the Texas sky, casting long shadows across the lumberyard. Men moved between stacks of fresh-cut pine and oak, their shirts dark with sweat despite the cooling temperature. A few glanced her way, some with sympathy, others with the smug satisfaction of knowing they earned twice what she did for the same labor. Lily made her way to the washing station, a crude wooden trough with a pump that drew water from the nearby Canadian River. She worked the handle vigorously, letting the cold water wash away the sawdust and grime that coated her skin. Her reflection in the water showed a woman of 22 with dark blonde hair pulled back in a practical braid, green eyes that had seen too much hardship too soon, and a determined set to her mouth that her mother used to say would get her in trouble someday. "He shortchanged you again?" Lily looked up to find Martha Greenfield, one of the few other women who worked at the mill, though Martha stayed mostly in the office doing bookkeeping. She was older, perhaps 40, with graying hair and the weary look of someone who had learned to accept injustice as an unchangeable fact of life. "Every time," Lily replied, shaking water from her hands. $8 for 2 weeks of work that would earn a man 16. Martha glanced around nervously before lowering her voice. "You should not challenge him so openly. Hutchins has a mean streak, and he has connections with the sheriff. Women who cause too much trouble tend to find themselves without employment and without options. So I should just accept it? Just let him steal from me?" "I am not saying it is right," Martha said, her tone weary. "I am saying it is the way things are. We survive by adapting, not by fighting battles we cannot win." Lily dried her hands on her work skirt, which was already so stained and worn that a little more water made no difference. She understood Martha's perspective, truly she did, but something in her refused to accept that this was simply the way things had to be. Her father had taught her that honest work deserved honest pay, and that principle felt like one of the few things she had left of him. The whistle blew, signaling the end of the workday. Men began filing out of the mill, heading toward the saloons and boarding houses that lined Tascosa's main street. Lily gathered her small bundle of possessions and joined the flow of workers leaving the lumberyard. The town of Tascosa had sprung up almost overnight when the railroad pushed through this part of the Texas Panhandle. It sat on the banks of the Canadian River, a collection of wooden buildings and false-fronted shops that served the cowboys, buffalo hunters, and traders who passed through. The main street was unpaved, turning to mud when it rained and dust when it did not. Lily walked past the Equity Saloon, the largest drinking establishment in town, where raucous laughter and piano music spilled into the street. Her boarding house sat at the edge of town, a two-story structure that housed mostly single men who worked various jobs around Tascosa. Mrs. Beckwith, the proprietor, ran a respectable establishment and did not tolerate drinking or violence under her roof. Lily had a small room on the second floor with barely enough space for a narrow bed, a washstand, and a trunk that held everything she owned. She climbed the stairs slowly, her muscles aching from the day's labor. Inside her room, she carefully counted the coins again, as if they might have multiplied during her walk home. Still $8. She placed 6 in a small tin she kept hidden beneath the floorboard under her bed, money she was saving for the inevitable day when Hutchins decided he no longer wanted a woman working at his mill. The remaining $2 would have to cover her food and necessities for the next 2 weeks. That night, Lily lay in bed listening to the sounds of Tascosa settling into evening. Somewhere a dog barked, and from the saloons came the muffled sounds of celebration and excess. She thought about her options, which seemed depressingly limited. She could continue working at the mill and accept the unfair wages, or she could leave and try to find something else. But what? She had no skills beyond physical labor, no education beyond basic reading and arithmetic, and no family to fall back on. Sleep came eventually, but it was restless and filled with dreams of confrontations she was too afraid to have in waking life. The next morning dawned cold and clear. Lily rose before sunrise, dressed in her work clothes, and made her way to the mill. The routine was so familiar now that she could almost do it without thinking. Clock in, receive her assignment, and spend the next 10 hours moving timber, operating machinery, or doing whatever other task Hutchins deemed necessary. Today she was assigned to the loading dock, helping to stack cut lumber onto wagons that would transport it to the railroad depot. It was demanding work that required strength and coordination. Lily worked alongside 3 men, and by mid-morning her shoulders burned and her hands had developed fresh blisters despite the calluses she had built up over months of labor. During the brief lunch break, she sat in the shade of a massive oak tree, eating the dry bread and cheese she had brought from the boarding house. Around her, the men clustered in their own groups, talking and joking in the easy camaraderie that came from shared hardship. Lily had never been invited into those circles, existing instead in a strange limbo where she was neither fully accepted nor entirely shunned. She was just finishing her meager meal when she noticed a stranger entering the mill yard. He was impossible to miss, a mountain of a man who stood well over 6 feet tall with shoulders so broad they seemed to block out the sun. He wore buckskin pants and a heavy shirt that did little to conceal the powerful muscles of his chest and arms. Dark hair fell past his shoulders, tied back with a leather cord, and a thick beard covered the lower half of his face. Everything about him spoke of strength and self-reliance, from the way he moved with predatory grace to the rifle he carried with casual familiarity. The stranger made his way directly to Hutchins' office, his boots kicking up small clouds of dust with each step. Conversations around the yard died down as workers stopped to watch this newcomer with obvious curiosity. Men like him were not uncommon in this part of Texas, mountain men and trappers who ventured down from the Rockies to trade furs and supplies, but they rarely had business at lumber mills. Lily found herself staring along with everyone else, though she could not have said exactly why this particular man commanded such attention. Perhaps it was simply his size or the way he carried himself with absolute confidence, as if he had never once doubted his place in the world. The stranger emerged from Hutchins' office after only a few minutes, his expression unreadable. He scanned the yard methodically, his gaze moving from worker to worker until it landed on Lily. For a moment their eyes met, and she felt a jolt of something she could not quite name. Then he turned and walked back toward the main road, disappearing as suddenly as he had arrived. "That was Asher Erickson," one of the men said, his tone carrying a mix of respect and wariness. "Mountain man from up Colorado way. Heard he fought Comanche and lived to tell about it." "What is he doing in Tascosa?" another asked. "Who knows? Men like that do not explain themselves to anyone." The whistle blew, ending lunch break and sending everyone back to their assigned tasks. Lily returned to the loading dock, but her thoughts kept drifting back to the stranger, to Asher Erickson and his penetrating gaze. She told herself it meant nothing, that he had probably just been taking in his surroundings, but the memory of that moment lingered. The afternoon passed in a blur of physical exertion. By the time the end-of-day whistle blew, Lily's entire body ached and fresh blisters had broken open on her palms, leaving them raw and bleeding. She washed up at the trough, then made her weary way back toward the boarding house. She was passing the general store when a deep voice called out behind her. "Miss?" Lily turned to find Asher Erickson standing a few feet away, even more imposing up close than he had been at a distance. He was perhaps 27 or 28, she guessed, with eyes the color of storm clouds and a scar that cut through his left eyebrow. "Yes?" she managed, suddenly very aware of how disheveled she must look after a long day of hard labor. "You work at Hutchins' mill," he said. It was not a question. "I do." "You are the woman he pays half wages." Heat rushed to Lily's face, a mixture of embarrassment and anger. "How do you know about that?" "Heard him bragging about it in the saloon last night," Asher replied, his expression darkening. "Said he had a woman working for half what a man costs, and that other mill owners were fools not to take advantage of such savings." Lily felt something crack inside her chest, a dam that had been holding back months of frustration and humiliation. Hutchins had not only been cheating her, he had been boasting about it. She blinked rapidly, refusing to let tears fall in front of this stranger. "I see," she said stiffly. "Well, there's nothing I can do about it. I need the work, and he knows it." Asher was quiet for a moment, studying her with an intensity that made her want to squirm. Then he said, "What if there was something you could do about it?" "What do you mean?" "I mean that what Hutchins is doing is theft, pure and simple. If you are doing the same work as the men, you deserve the same pay, and there are ways to make sure a man honors his obligations." Lily shook her head. "I appreciate the sentiment, but confronting him will only get me fired. I've already tried talking to him about it." "Who said anything about just talking?" Asher's voice carried an edge that sent a shiver down her spine. "I cannot afford to lose this job," Lily said, hearing the desperation in her own voice. "It is all I have." Asher stepped closer, and Lily caught the scent of leather and pine and open sky. "Tell me something. How much does Hutchins owe you? Total, for all the months you've been working there at half wages?" Lily did not have to think about it. She'd calculated the number many times, lying awake at night and staring at the ceiling of her small room. "Roughly $48, if I'm being paid $8 when I should be getting $16, and I have been there for 6 months. $48, Asher repeated. "And what would you do with that money if you had it?" "I would leave Tascosa," Lily said, the words coming before she could stop them. "I would go to Denver or Santa Fe, somewhere with more opportunities, and I would find work that pays fairly." Asher nodded slowly, as if she had just confirmed something he had already suspected. "Give me 2 days. Do not confront Hutchins. Do not do anything different. Just work your regular shifts and keep your head down. Can you do that?" "I do not understand. What are you planning?" "Just trust me," Asher said, and there was something in his voice that made Lily want to do exactly that, despite barely knowing this man. 2 days. That's all I'm asking." Before Lily could respond, he turned and walked away, his long strides carrying him quickly down the street. She stood frozen on the boardwalk, her mind racing with questions and possibilities. Who was this man, and why did he care about her wages? What could he possibly do in 2 days that would change her situation? That night, Lily could not stop thinking about the encounter. She lay in bed replaying the conversation, analyzing every word and gesture. Asher Erickson had looked at her not with pity, but with something else, something that made her feel seen in a way she had not experienced since her father died. It was unsettling and comforting in equal measure. The next day at the mill passed with agonizing slowness. Lily kept expecting something to happen, for Asher to appear, or for Hutchins to suddenly announce changes to the pay structure. But nothing out of the ordinary occurred. She worked her shift, endured the usual exhaustion and pain, and collected no pay since it was not yet the end of the 2-week period. On the second day, just after lunch, Lily was stacking lumber when she heard raised voices coming from Hutchins' office. She could not make out the words, but one of the voices was definitely Asher's deep rumble. Her heart began to race as she abandoned her work and moved closer, trying to look casual while straining to hear. The office door suddenly flew open and Hutchins stumbled out, his face red and his eyes wide with barely suppressed fury. Behind him came Asher, radiating a calm menace that was somehow more frightening than any display of temper. "You cannot threaten me," Hutchins sputtered. "I will have the sheriff arrest you." "I am not threatening you," Asher replied, his voice carrying easily across the suddenly silent lumberyard. "I am informing you of facts. Miss Thorne has been working for you for 6 months at half the wages you pay your male employees for identical work. That is theft, and theft has consequences." "She agreed to those wages," Hutchins shot back. "I did nothing illegal." "Except brag about how you were cheating her," Asher said. "Funny thing, I ran into Judge Morrison this morning, told him about your business practices. He found them very interesting, especially given that his daughter is seeking employment. Made him wonder if you would try to cheat her the same way." Hutchins's face went from red to white. Judge Morrison was one of the most powerful men in the Texas Panhandle, with connections that reached all the way to Austin. Offending him would be disastrous for business. "Furthermore," Asher continued, "I happened to mention your creative accounting to some of the other mill owners in the area. They were disturbed to hear that you have been undercutting their prices by exploiting workers. Several of them are considering filing formal complaints about unfair business practices." "You had no right," Hutchins said, but the bluster had gone out of his voice. "I had every right to discuss facts," Asher replied. "Now you have a choice. You can pay Miss Thorne what you owe her, including the $48 in back wages, plus her current pay at the fair rate of $16 per 2-week period. Or you can deal with Judge Morrison, the other mill owners, and every cowboy and ranch hand who hears about how you cheat women out of honest wages. Your choice." The entire mill yard had gone silent. Every worker had stopped what they were doing to watch this confrontation unfold. Lily felt as if she were in a dream, unable to quite believe what was happening. Hutchins looked around at the watching faces, calculation flickering behind his eyes. He was trapped, and he knew it. His reputation meant everything in a town like Tascosa, and if word spread that he was a cheat who could not be trusted, his business would suffer. "Fine," he spat. "Miss Thorne can come to my office and collect her back wages, and going forward, all employees will be paid equally for equal work." A murmur ran through the assembled workers, some approving, some shocked. Asher simply nodded, as if he had expected nothing less. "See that you keep your word, Hutchins, because if I hear otherwise, I will be back." Hutchins retreated into his office, slamming the door behind him. Asher turned, and his eyes found Lily across the yard. He walked over to her, his expression softening slightly. "Go collect what is owed to you," he said quietly, "and do not let him intimidate you. You earned that money with your sweat and blood." Lily wanted to say so many things, to thank him and ask him why he had done this and find out everything about him, but her throat felt tight and her eyes stung with tears she refused to shed in front of all these watching men. So she simply nodded and walked toward Hutchins's office on legs that felt strangely unsteady. Inside the small, cramped office, Hutchins was already counting out money from a locked box he kept in his desk. He did not look at Lily as he slammed the bills and coins onto the desk. $48 in back wages, he said through gritted teeth, plus 16 for this current pay period, even though it is not finished yet. $64 total. Count it if you do not trust me. Lily counted it carefully, half expecting him to have shorted her again out of spite. But it was all there, more money than she had held at once in her entire life. She folded the bills carefully and tucked them into the pocket she had sewn into the inside of her skirt. "Thank you," she said, because her mother had raised her to be polite, even to those who did not deserve it. Hutchins finally looked at her, his expression poisonous. "You are fired. I do not care what that mountain man threatened. I will not have a troublemaker in my employ." Lily had expected as much, but hearing the words still sent a jolt of fear through her. Then she thought about the $64 in her pocket, enough to live on for months if she was careful, enough to get her to another town with better opportunities. And she thought about Asher Erickson, who had stood up for her when no one else would. "I understand," she said. "I will collect my things." She walked out of the office with her head high, aware of all the eyes following her. The other workers parted to let her pass, and she heard a few murmured words of congratulation mixed with speculation about what would happen next. Asher stood near the entrance to the mill yard, waiting. "He fired me," Lily said when she reached him. I figured he would, Asher replied. Spineless men do not like being made to look small, even when they deserve it. I have the money, though, Lily said, unable to keep the wonder out of her voice. All of it, every penny owed. Something that might have been a smile tugged at the corner of Asher's mouth beneath his beard. Good. That is how it should be. They stood there for a moment, the sounds of the mill resuming behind them as workers returned to their tasks. Lily knew she should say something, should find words adequate to express her gratitude, but everything that came to mind seemed insufficient. Why did you do this? She finally asked. You do not even know me? Asher was quiet for a long moment, his storm-gray eyes studying her face. I have seen a lot of injustice in my life, Miss Thorne. Done some things I am not proud of, failed to act when I should have. But when I heard Hutchins bragging about cheating you, about exploiting your desperation for his own profit, something in me just could not let it stand. Maybe I am trying to balance some scales, or maybe I just could not stomach the idea of a man like that getting away with it. Does the reason matter? It matters to me, Lily said softly. Before Asher could respond, Martha Greenfield hurried up to them, slightly out of breath. Lily, I just heard what happened. Are you all right? I'm fine, Martha. Better than fine, actually. Martha glanced nervously at Asher, then back to Lily. What will you do now? Without employment, I mean. It was a good question, one Lily had not fully considered yet. The money would keep her fed and housed for a while, but eventually she would need to find work again. She opened her mouth to say she was not sure, but Asher spoke first. I might know of an opportunity, he said slowly, as if the thought was just forming as he spoke. If you are interested in hearing about it. Both women looked at him expectantly. Asher shifted his weight, suddenly seeming less certain than he had been when confronting Hutchins. Eat in ta. I have a cabin about 30 miles north of here, up in the foothills where the Llano Estacado rises toward the Rockies. Been trapping and hunting up that way for 5 years and doing all right for myself. But this past year, I have been thinking about expanding, maybe running some cattle, doing more trading. The problem is, I cannot be in 2 places at once. I need someone to help manage things, keep the books, handle supplies when I'm out on longer trips. It would be hard work, isolated, but the pay would be fair and you would have your own space. Lily stared at him, trying to process what he was suggesting. Go live on his property, work for him, be miles from any town or other people. It sounded either like an incredible opportunity or a terrible mistake, and she could not immediately tell which. I could not possibly, she began, but Martha interrupted. Actually, that might not be a bad idea, the older woman said thoughtfully. Lily, you do not have many options here. Even if you found another job in Tascosa, word will spread about what happened with Hutchins. Some employers will admire your courage, but others will see you as a troublemaker. And I hate to say it, but a young woman alone in this town, without steady employment, faces certain risks. Lily knew she was right. Tascosa had a rough element, and women without protection or means sometimes found themselves with very limited and unpleasant choices. I would not expect an answer right now, Asher said. Think about it. I am staying at the boarding house, same one as you actually, for the next few days while I finish some business in town. If you decide you are interested, let me know. If not, no hard feelings. He tipped his hat to both women and walked away, leaving Lily standing in the mill yard with her mind spinning and her future suddenly full of strange possibilities. That evening, Lily sat in her small room, counting and recounting her money. $64 was a fortune compared to what she had yesterday, but Martha was right that it would not last forever. She needed to think about her next move carefully. The idea of working for Asher Erickson was both appealing and terrifying. On one hand, he had demonstrated integrity and courage by standing up to Hutchins. He had asked for nothing in return and had been careful to phrase his job offer in a way that gave her full autonomy to refuse. On the other hand, she would be completely isolated and dependent on a man she barely knew. If he turned out to be less honorable than he seemed, she would have no recourse and no help. Lily spent a sleepless night weighing her options. By morning, she had made a decision, though she was not entirely sure it was the right one. Something in her gut told her to trust Asher Erickson, and after years of having to rely solely on herself, that instinct felt significant. She found him at breakfast in the boarding house dining room, sitting alone at a corner table with a plate piled high with eggs, bacon, and biscuits. He looked up when she approached, and she saw something flicker in his eyes that might have been hope. "May I join you?" Lily asked. "Of course." She sat down, suddenly nervous. "I've been thinking about your offer." And? "And I would like to accept if it is still available. But I need to understand exactly what would be expected of me and what arrangements would be made for my safety and privacy." Asher set down his fork and gave her his full attention. "Fair questions. Here's what I am proposing. You would help manage the day-to-day operations of my place. That means keeping track of supplies, doing some cooking and preserving when game comes in, helping with basic maintenance, and handling any trading that happens when I'm away. In return, you would get $15 a month, which I know is less than you were making at the mill, but reflects that housing and food are provided. You would have your own cabin, a small one I built last year that I have been using for storage. It has a good stove, a real bed, and a door that locks from the inside. I would not enter without your permission, and you would be free to leave at any time if you felt unsafe or simply changed your mind." "What about supplies?" Lily asked. "If we are 30 miles from town, how would I get necessities?" "I make a trip into Tascosa or one of the other settlements every few weeks. You would come with me when you wanted to, or give me a list if you preferred to stay, and I would teach you to handle a rifle, both for hunting and for protection. There are still Comanche in the area, though they are mostly peaceful these days, and occasionally drifters or outlaws pass through. You should know how to defend yourself." Lily considered this. It was all very practical and reasonable, which somehow made her more inclined to trust him. If he had tried to paint the situation as perfectly safe or made promises that sounded too good to be true, she would have been suspicious. "When would we leave?" she asked. "Tomorrow, if you are ready, or we could wait a few more days if you need time to prepare." "Tomorrow's fine," Lily said, surprised by her own decisiveness. "I do not have much to pack, and there's nothing keeping me here." This time, Asher definitely smiled, a transformation that softened his rugged features and made him look younger. "Then tomorrow it is. We will leave at first light, dress warm and practical, and pack light. We will be on horseback for most of the day." They spent the rest of breakfast discussing practical details, and Lily found herself relaxing into the conversation. Asher was easy to talk to despite his intimidating appearance, and he treated her like an intelligent equal rather than a helpless woman who needed to be managed. It was refreshing in a way that made her realize how rarely men spoke to her with genuine respect. The next morning arrived cold and clear. Lily woke before dawn, dressed in her most practical clothing, and packed her few belongings into a canvas sack. She said goodbye to Mrs. Beckwith, who gave her a long look that held both concern and understanding. "You be careful, girl," the older woman said, "and if things are not what they seem, you come right back here. I will always have a room for you." "Thank you," Lily said, touched by the unexpected kindness. "I will." Asher was waiting outside with 2 horses, a massive bay gelding for himself and a smaller but sturdy-looking mare for Lily. He helped her secure her belongings, then showed her how to mount properly. "Have you ridden much?" he asked. "Some when I was younger," Lily admitted, "but not in a few years." "It will come back to you. Just stay relaxed and let Daisy do most of the work. She is steady and knows the trail." They rode out of Tascosa, as the sun was just beginning to paint the eastern sky with shades of pink and gold. The town looked almost beautiful in that early light, its rough edges softened by distance and dawn. Lily felt a strange mixture of apprehension and excitement as they left the last buildings behind and headed north across the open prairie. The landscape was vast and lonely, an ocean of grass broken occasionally by stands of mesquite and scrub oak. In the distance, she could see the darker line that marked where the land began to rise toward the Rockies, still hundreds of miles away but visible on the horizon. The only sounds were the steady rhythm of the horses' hooves, the creak of leather saddles, and the occasional cry of a hawk circling overhead. They rode for hours with only brief stops to rest the horses and stretch their legs. Asher proved to be a mostly silent companion, though not in an unfriendly way. He simply seemed comfortable with quiet, and Lily found she did not mind. There was something peaceful about moving through this vast landscape without the need for constant conversation. Around midday, they stopped by a small creek to water the horses and eat the cold lunch Mrs. Beckwith had packed for them. Lily sat on a smooth rock and ate her bread and dried meat while watching the water flow past. "What made you come to Texas?" she asked, breaking the companionable silence. "You said you were from Colorado way." Asher was quiet for a moment, chewing thoughtfully. "Restlessness, mostly. I spent my early years in the mountains, trapping beaver and living rough, but the beaver trade mostly died out, and I got tired of the cold winters and the crowds of prospectors. Heard there was good opportunity down this way for a man willing to work hard and live simply. So I came south, found a piece of land that felt right, and built myself a life." "Do you ever get lonely?" The question slipped out before Lily could think better of it. Asher looked at her, his gray eyes thoughtful. "Sometimes. I like solitude, always have, but there's a difference between being alone by choice and being isolated because you have no other option. I've been feeling that difference more acutely lately." Lily understood that sentiment all too well. She had been surrounded by people in Tascosa, but had felt profoundly alone, with no real connections or friendships to anchor her. Perhaps isolation with one person who treated her with respect would be less lonely than a town full of people who saw her as less than equal. They remounted and continued north. The land began to change as they rode, the flat prairie giving way to rolling hills and rocky outcroppings. Trees became more numerous, pines and juniper replacing the mesquite of the lower elevation. The air grew cooler and carried the scent of pine resin and earth. As the sun began to sink toward the western horizon, they crested a rise, and Lily got her first view of what would be her new home. A valley spread before them, green and sheltered, with a clear stream running through its center. On the far side stood 2 log cabins, one significantly larger than the other, both built solid and square with stone chimneys rising from their roofs. Behind them, a barn and several smaller outbuildings completed the homestead. It was simple and rough, but well maintained and clearly built to last. "That is it," Asher said, and Lily heard a note of pride in his voice. "Built most of it myself over the past 5 years." "It is beautiful," Lily said, and meant it. After months in dusty, crowded Tascosa, this quiet valley felt like a sanctuary. They rode down into the valley as twilight gathered. Asher showed her to the smaller cabin, which was indeed just one room, but was clean and well built. There was a narrow bed with a real mattress, a small cast-iron stove for heat and cooking, a table with 2 chairs and several shelves along the walls. A window looked out toward the stream, and the door had a sturdy iron bolt on the inside. "I will bring your things in, then get a fire going so you can warm up," Asher said. "Once you are settled, come over to the main cabin and I will fix us some dinner." True to his word, he built up a fire in the stove until the cabin was filled with warmth, then left her alone to unpack and arrange her few belongings. Lily took her time, hanging her extra dress on a peg, arranging her brush and few personal items on the shelf, making the space feel like hers. It was strange to have a whole cabin to herself, stranger still to realize that she felt safe here, in this isolated valley with a man she barely knew. When she finally made her way to the main cabin, full dark had fallen, and stars blazed overhead in numbers that took her breath away. She had never seen so many stars, the night sky in Tascosa having been washed out by lanterns and campfires. Here, they seemed close enough to touch. Asher had been busy. The main cabin was warm and welcoming, with lanterns casting golden light across rough-hewn furniture, and walls hung with furs and tools. The smell of cooking meat filled the air, making Lily's stomach growl with sudden hunger. "Venison stew," Asher said, ladling it into 2 wooden bowls. "Nothing fancy, but it will fill you up." They ate at a solid wooden table, and Lily was surprised to find herself relaxing. The stew was simple but good, and being in this warm cabin after a long day of riding felt almost perfect. Asher told her more about the routines of the homestead, what animals they had, what crops he planted in the small garden patch, how the trading worked with passing travelers and nearby ranches. "I am heading out on a hunting trip in 3 days," he said. "We'll probably be gone for about a week. That will give you time to get familiar with the place and the routines without me hovering over you. Think you can manage?" Lily felt a flutter of nervousness but pushed it down. "Yes. Just show me everything I need to know before you go." "I will." Over the next 3 days, Asher proved to be a thorough and patient teacher. He showed her where everything was stored, how to care for the 3 horses in the barn, how to check the trap lines he kept near the creek, how to preserve meat, and what wild plants in the area were safe to eat. Most importantly, he taught her to shoot, spending hours with her at an improvised range until she could hit a target with reasonable consistency. "The goal is not to be a sharpshooter," he explained, "just to be competent enough to defend yourself if necessary, and maybe bring down some game for the pot." Lily took to the lessons with determination, knowing her safety might someday depend on these skills. Asher was encouraging without being patronizing, correcting her mistakes without making her feel foolish. She found herself watching him when he was not looking, noticing the way muscles moved beneath his shirt when he demonstrated proper shooting stance, the competent efficiency with which he handled every task, the quiet confidence that seemed as much a part of him as his gray eyes. She was developing feelings for him, she realized with a start. It was ridiculous. They had known each other less than a week, but something about Asher Erickson called to something deep inside her. Perhaps it was the way he had stood up for her when no one else would, or the respect with which he treated her, or simply the fact that he seemed so entirely comfortable in his own skin, so certain of who he was and what he stood for. On the morning Asher was set to leave on his hunting trip, Lily rose early to help him prepare. He packed his saddlebags with supplies, checked his rifle and pistol, and gave her final instructions about what to do in various scenarios. "If anyone comes by, use your judgment about whether to interact with them," he said. "Most folks around here are honest, but trust your instincts. If something feels wrong, get inside your cabin, bolt the door, and wait them out. I have a reputation in these parts, and most people would not risk crossing me by causing trouble on my land." "How long will you really be gone?" Lily asked, trying to keep her voice casual despite the anxiety building in her chest. "A week, maybe a bit more if the hunting is good. But I will be back before you run out of supplies or start talking to the horses like they are people." Lily laughed despite her nervousness. "I make no promises about that last part." Asher smiled, then grew more serious. "You will be fine, Lily. You are stronger and more capable than you give yourself credit for. Trust yourself." He mounted his bay gelding and rode out of the valley, turning once to wave before disappearing into the trees. Lily stood watching until he was out of sight, then took a deep breath and turned to survey her new domain. The first day alone was strange. Lily kept busy with the various tasks Asher had outlined, checking the horses, gathering eggs from the small chicken coop, hauling water from the stream. But the silence felt oppressive after the constant noise of the lumber mill in Tascosa's streets. Every crack of a branch or rustle of leaves made her jump, her imagination conjuring threats from shadows. By the second day, she had begun to settle into the rhythm of the place. She rose with the sun, completed her morning chores, spent the afternoon exploring the valley and identifying the plants Asher had taught her about, and ended each day with target practice to keep her skills sharp. The isolation that had seemed so daunting began to feel peaceful, giving her space to think and breathe without the constant pressure of other people's judgments. On the fourth day, a rider appeared at the edge of the valley. Lily spotted him from where she was hanging laundry near her cabin, and her heart immediately began to race. She remembered Asher's instructions and evaluated the situation carefully. The man was alone, older, riding a tired-looking horse and leading a pack mule. He did not look particularly threatening. She went into her cabin and retrieved the rifle, checking that it was loaded before stepping back outside. The rider had stopped at a respectful distance and raised one hand in greeting. "Hello, the camp," he called. "Asher Erickson around?" "He's away on a hunting trip," Lily called back, keeping the rifle lowered but ready. "Can I help you with something?" The man squinted at her. "You must be the new help he mentioned last time I passed through. Name is Carl Wheeler. I run a trading post about 20 miles east of here. I bring Asher supplies once a month or so, and he usually has furs or game to trade in return." Lily relaxed slightly. Asher had mentioned Carl Wheeler during their conversations. "He said he would not be back for a few more days, but if you want to leave the supplies, I can give you a note authorizing payment when he returns." Carl shook his head. "That's all right. I will just come back through next week. No rush on my end. You managing all right out here on your own?" "I'm fine, thank you." "Well, you need anything. My place is due east along the creek. Just follow the water and you will run right into it. Asher knows the way." He tipped his hat and rode off, and Lily felt a surge of satisfaction. She had handled the situation calmly and competently, without panicking or making mistakes. It was a small thing, but it felt like proof that she could manage here, that she was not helpless or dependent. The rest of the week passed without incident. Lily fell into a routine that felt surprisingly natural, taking satisfaction in the simple tasks that kept the homestead running. She discovered that she enjoyed the physical labor when she was doing it for herself, rather than for someone who did not value her work. Her hands were still calloused and her muscles still ached by the end of each day, but it felt different somehow, more purposeful. On the 8th day, Asher returned. Lily was hauling water from the stream when she heard hoofbeats and looked up to see him riding down into the valley, his horse laden with the results of his hunt. Her heart did an unexpected flip at the sight of him, and she had to force herself to walk calmly over rather than run. "Welcome back," she said, unable to keep the smile from her face. "Did you have a successful trip?" Very," Asher replied, dismounting with easy grace despite what must have been long hours in the saddle. 3 deer and 2 elk. We will be eating well for months and the hides will bring good money. How did things go here?" "Fine. Carl Wheeler stopped by, but I told him you would not be back for a few days. He said he would come by next week instead." "Good. You did good, Lily." The approval in his voice warmed her more than it should have. She helped him unload the horses and hang the game to age in the small smokehouse behind the main cabin. They worked together in comfortable silence, and Lily realized that sometime over the past week, this place had begun to feel like home. That evening, they shared dinner in the main cabin like they had before Asher left. But something felt different now, a new awareness humming beneath their casual conversation. Lily caught Asher watching her when he thought she was not looking, his expression thoughtful and intent, and she was acutely conscious of every movement he made, every gesture and glance. "I missed this," Asher said suddenly, into a lull in the conversation. "Missed what?" "This. Having someone to share a meal with, to talk to at the end of the day. I did not realize how much I had been missing it until it was here, and then it was gone again while I was away." Lily's breath caught. "I missed it too," she admitted. "I missed you." The words hung in the air between them, heavy with implication. Asher set down his fork and looked at her directly, his gray eyes intense. "Lily, I need to be honest with you about something. All right? When I heard Hutchins bragging about cheating you, my first instinct was anger. I could not stand the injustice of it, and I acted to correct it. But after I met you, after I talked to you, it became about more than just fighting a wrong. I found myself wanting to help you specifically, wanting to know you better, wanting to keep you safe. That is why I offered you the job here. It was not just about needing help around the place. It was because I wanted you here, with me." Lily's heart was pounding so hard she was sure he could hear it. "Why are you telling me this now?" "Because I do not want there to be any dishonesty between us. If my feelings make you uncomfortable, I understand. Nothing has to change. Your job is secure regardless, and I will respect whatever boundaries you want to set. But I needed you to know the truth." Lily stood, her chair scraping against the wooden floor. For a moment she just looked at him, this strong, honorable man who had changed her life in a matter of days. Then she walked around the table and did something she had never done before. She took what she wanted without hesitation or apology. She leaned down and kissed him. For a heartbeat, Asher was frozen in surprise. Then his arms came around her, pulling her closer as he kissed her back with a hunger that matched her own. Lily's hands found his shoulders, feeling the solid muscle beneath his shirt, anchoring herself to him as the world tilted on its axis. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Asher rested his forehead against hers. "I was hoping you might feel the same," he said roughly, "but I did not dare assume." "I was not sure until you rode away," Lily admitted. "And then I knew, because I spent the whole week waiting for you to come back, counting the days until I could see you again." "What do we do now?" Asher asked. "I do not know," Lily said honestly. "I have never felt like this before, but I know I do not want to pretend it is not happening." They spent the next hour talking, really talking, about their feelings and what they might mean. Asher was careful to make sure Lily understood she was under no obligation, that her job and her place here were not contingent on returning his affection. But Lily already knew that. She had seen the kind of man Asher was, and she trusted him in a way she had not trusted anyone since her father died. Eventually, reluctantly, they agreed it was late and they should get some sleep. Asher walked Lily back to her cabin, and they stood outside her door under the brilliant stars. Thank you," Lily said softly, "for everything. For standing up to Hutchins, for offering me this opportunity, for being honest about your feelings." "You do not need to thank me," Asher replied. "You earned everything that is coming to you through your own courage and strength. I just made sure you got what you deserved." He kissed her once more, gently this time, then waited until she was safely inside her cabin before walking back to his own. Lily lay in bed, her lips still tingling, her heart full of a tentative joy she had not felt in years. The future, which had seemed so bleak and uncertain just weeks ago, now glimmered with possibility. The next few weeks fell into a new pattern. Lily and Asher worked side by side during the days, managing the homestead and preparing for the coming winter. But now their work was interspersed with stolen kisses and long conversations that stretched late into the night. They learned each other's stories, their hopes and fears and dreams. Lily told Asher about her childhood, about her mother who had died when she was 12, and her father who had done his best to raise her alone. She talked about the desperate months after his death, when she had been left with nothing but debts, and the knowledge that the world was not kind to women without protection or means. Asher shared his own past, about growing up in the mountains with a father who had taught him to hunt and trap and survive in the wilderness. He spoke of the loneliness of the mountain man's life, the beauty and harshness of living so close to nature, and the growing realization that he wanted something more than just survival. "I want to build something," he told her one evening as they sat by the stream watching the sunset. "Not just a homestead, but a real life. A family, maybe. Something that lasts beyond just me." Lily's heart swelled at those words, at the implication that he might see her as part of that future. But she was also cautious, aware that it had only been a few weeks and that strong feelings in the heat of the moment did not always translate to lasting commitment. As autumn deepened into early winter, Carl Wheeler made his monthly visit. This time Asher was home, and they conducted their usual trade, furs and preserved meat for supplies and ammunition. Carl gave Lily an approving nod. "Place looks good," he said to Asher. "You made a smart decision bringing her on. Always said you needed someone with sense helping you run things." After Carl left, Lily and Asher processed the new supplies, storing them carefully in the root cellar Asher had dug behind the main cabin. They were getting ready for winter, laying in food and firewood, checking that the buildings were tight against the cold winds that would soon sweep down from the mountains. One morning, Lily woke to find the world transformed by the first snow of the season. It was not heavy yet, just a thin blanket of white that made everything look clean and new. She dressed warmly and stepped outside to find Asher already up and working, hauling extra hay into the barn for the horses. "Beautiful, is not it?" he said when he saw her. "First snow always feels like a promise, like the world is starting fresh." They worked together all morning, completing the final preparations for winter. By afternoon they were both tired and cold, and Asher suggested they take a break in the main cabin by the fire. Lily was happy to agree, her fingers numb despite her gloves. Inside, Asher built up the fire until it roared in the hearth, then made them both hot coffee. They sat together on the rough bench he had built, shoulders touching, watching the flames dance. "Lily," Asher said after a while, his voice serious, "I need to ask you something." "What is it?" "We have been dancing around this for weeks now, and I do not want to presume anything, but I need to know what you are thinking about the future. About us." Lily turned to face him, seeing the vulnerability in his eyes despite his strong features and intimidating size. "I'm thinking that I have never been happier than I am here with you," she said honestly. "I'm thinking that what started as gratitude has become something much deeper. I'm thinking that I'm falling in love with you, Asher Erickson, and it terrifies me because I have never felt this way before." Asher set down his coffee cup and took both her hands in his. "I love you, Lily. I have loved you since you stood up to Hutchins that first day, so fierce and brave even though you were frightened. I love your strength and your honesty and the way you never give up even when things are hard, and I want you to stay here. Not just as someone who works for me, but as my partner. My wife, if you will have me? Lily felt tears prick her eyes, happy tears this time. You want to marry me? I do. I know it has not been long, and I know we are still learning about each other. But I also know what I feel, and I know I want to build a life with you. Will you marry me, Lily Thorne? Yes, Lily said, the word coming out as half laugh, half sob. Yes, I will marry you. Asher pulled her into his arms and kissed her deeply, and Lily felt something settle into place inside her chest, like a key turning in a lock. This was right. This man, this place, this life they were building together. It was everything she had not known she was looking for. They decided to have a small ceremony at Carl Wheeler's trading post, which served as an informal gathering place for the scattered homesteaders and ranchers in the area. Carl agreed to stand as witness, and his wife Martha was delighted to help Lily prepare. The trading post was modest, just a large room with goods stacked on rough shelves and a few tables and chairs for customers who wanted to linger and trade news along with goods. But Martha hung some pine boughs and brought out her best tablecloth, and by the time the ceremony was ready to start, the space felt festive and warm. A circuit preacher happened to be passing through, a stroke of luck that saved them having to wait weeks for the next one. He was an elderly man with a kind face and a voice that carried surprising power when he began to speak the marriage vows. Lily wore her best dress, which Martha had helped her alter and press. It was simple gray wool, nothing fancy, but she had pinned a small bunch of winter berries to her bodice, and Martha had arranged her hair in a style that made her feel almost elegant. Asher had trimmed his beard and wore a clean shirt, and the way he looked at her when she walked up to stand beside him made her feel like the most beautiful woman in the world. The ceremony was brief, but meaningful. They spoke their vows clearly and firmly, promising to love and honor each other through whatever challenges life might bring. When the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, Asher kissed her with such tenderness that Lily felt her heart might burst. Carl and Martha provided a simple feast, venison and potatoes, and pie made from dried apples. A few other locals had heard about the wedding and stopped by to offer congratulations, and the afternoon passed in a warm blur of well wishes and laughter. By evening, Lily and Asher were riding back to their valley, now officially husband and wife. That night, Lily moved her few belongings from the small cabin into the main one, combining her life with Asher's in that simple act. They lay together in his bed, now their bed, and Lily felt a peace she had never experienced before. She was safe, she was loved, and she was home. The winter that followed was hard but beautiful. The snows came heavy and frequent, sometimes trapping them in the valley for days at a time. But they had prepared well, and there was something magical about being snowed in with the person you loved, with nothing to do but keep the fires burning and talk and make plans for the spring. Asher taught Lily more skills during those long winter days. She learned to tan hides, to make soap, to repair harnesses and boots. He showed her how to read the signs of weather and wildlife, how to track animals through snow, how to predict when the thaw would come. In turn, Lily shared what she knew about keeping detailed records, about managing resources efficiently, about all the small domestic skills her mother had taught her before she died. They were building something together, a partnership that went beyond just affection. They were creating a life that played to both their strengths, where each person's contribution was valued equally. It was everything Lily had dreamed of, but never quite believed possible. Spring came eventually, as it always does. The snow melted into rushing streams, and the valley floor erupted in wildflowers. Asher and Lily planted a larger garden than he had attempted in previous years, knowing that they would need more food with 2 people to feed. They worked from dawn to dusk, but it was satisfying work, the kind that left them tired but content at the end of each day. On an evening in late April, as they sat outside watching the stars appear, Lily realized something and turned to Asher with wide eyes. "I am late," she said simply. Asher looked confused for a moment, then understanding dawned. "Do you think—" "I think I might be pregnant," Lily said, fear and joy warring in her voice. "It is too early to be certain, but all the signs are there." Asher pulled her close, his hand settling protectively over her still flat stomach. "How do you feel about that?" "Terrified," Lily admitted, "but also happy, so happy. Is that strange?" "Not strange at all," Asher said, and she could hear the emotion in his voice. "A baby." We are going to have a baby. The next few months were a whirlwind of preparation and adjustment. Lily's pregnancy progressed smoothly, though she had bouts of morning sickness that left her miserable. Asher hovered and worried, becoming almost comically protective. He insisted on doing all the heavy work around the homestead, barely letting Lily lift anything heavier than a water bucket. "I am pregnant, not made of glass," she told him more than once, exasperated but touched by his concern. "I know that," Asher replied, "but I also know that you and the baby are the most precious things in my world, and I will not take any chances with your safety." In early autumn, just as the leaves were beginning to turn, Lily went into labor. Martha Wheeler came to help, having delivered dozens of babies at various homesteads over the years. The labor was long and difficult, and there were moments when Lily was certain she could not endure another contraction. But Martha was calm and capable, and Asher held her hand through it all, whispering encouragement and love. Finally, as the sun was setting, their son was born. He came into the world with a loud cry that announced his presence to the valley, and when Martha placed him in Lily's arms, she felt a love so fierce and immediate it took her breath away. "He is perfect," Asher said, his voice thick with emotion. His finger traced gently over the baby's tiny hand, and the infant's fingers curled around it reflexively. "He is absolutely perfect." They named him James, after Lily's father. He was a healthy baby with a strong set of lungs and his father's gray eyes. Asher proved to be a devoted father, taking to the role with the same competence he brought to everything else. He made a wooden cradle that rocked smoothly, carved toys for when the baby would be old enough to appreciate them, and spent hours just holding his son and marveling at the tiny miracle they had created. The years that followed were not without challenges. There were harsh winters and dry summers, times when money was tight and times when illness threatened. When James was 2, Lily gave birth to their daughter, whom they named Sarah. 2 years after that came another son, Robert. The small cabin that had once seemed spacious began to feel cramped with 3 children running around, and Asher spent a summer building an addition that doubled their living space. The children grew strong and healthy, learning the skills they would need to thrive in this harsh but beautiful land. James inherited his father's quiet competence and his mother's determination. Sarah was adventurous and bold, always the first to try something new. Robert was gentle and thoughtful, with a natural gift for working with animals. Through it all, Lily and Asher's love deepened and matured. They weathered storms, both literal and figurative, always standing together, always facing challenges as partners. The fierce passion of their early days mellowed into something quieter, but no less profound, a bone-deep certainty that they belonged together. Lily never forgot where she had come from, the desperation and injustice that had defined her life before Asher. Sometimes, when visitors came to the homestead and expressed surprise at seeing a woman working alongside her husband as an equal partner, she would tell them about the mill in Tascosa and the owner who had paid her half what he paid the men. And she would tell them about the mountain man who had made sure she got every penny owed, and how that single act of standing up for what was right had changed the course of her entire life. The homestead prospered over the years. Asher's reputation as an honest trader spread, and they did good business with ranchers and travelers throughout the region. They never became wealthy, but they built a comfortable life where they wanted for nothing truly important. They had food on their table, a solid roof over their heads, and most importantly, they had each other and their children. When Carl Wheeler eventually retired, Asher and Lily bought his trading post, expanding their operation while keeping the homestead as their primary residence. The trading post became a gathering place for the scattered families in the area, somewhere people could not only buy supplies, but also share news and find community in a lonely land. Lily took particular satisfaction in hiring other women who needed work, always paying them fairly and treating them with respect. She remembered too well what it felt like to have your labor devalued simply because of your sex, and she was determined that no woman in her employ would ever experience that particular injustice. Word spread, and their trading post became known as a place where anyone willing to work hard would be treated fairly, regardless of whether they were male or female, young or old. As their children grew into adults, each found their own path. James eventually took over the day-to-day management of the trading post, showing a natural head for business. Sarah married a rancher and moved to New Mexico, though she visited regularly with her growing family. Robert studied to become a veterinarian, a new profession that was gaining respect as more people settled the West and needed someone knowledgeable to care for their livestock. Through it all, Asher and Lily remained the center of their family's orbit, the foundation on which everything else was built. They grew older together, their hair turning gray and their movements slowing, but their love never diminished. If anything, it grew stronger with each passing year, enriched by shared memories and the knowledge that they had built something lasting. On a warm summer evening, many years after their wedding, Lily and Asher sat on the porch of their homestead, watching the sun set over the valley. Their grandchildren played in the yard, their laughter carrying on the evening breeze. James and his wife were visiting from the trading post, and Sarah had arrived that morning with her husband and children. "Do you ever think about how different your life would have been if I had not heard Hutchins bragging that night?" Asher asked, his hand finding Lily's as naturally as breathing. Lily squeezed his fingers, feeling the familiar calluses and strength. "I think about it sometimes," she admitted, "but I try not to dwell on it. What matters is what actually happened and the life we built together." "Still," Asher persisted, "you could have ended up anywhere, with anyone. You could have taken that back pay and gone to Denver or Santa Fe like you planned. You could have had a completely different life." "Maybe," Lily said, "but it would not have been this life. It would not have been you and our children and our grandchildren. It would not have been this home that we built with our own hands. And I cannot imagine wanting anything different than what we have right here." Asher lifted her hand to his lips and kissed it gently. "I'm a lucky man." "We are both lucky," Lily corrected. "We found each other when we needed it most. You saw something in me worth fighting for, and I saw something in you worth trusting. Everything else grew from that." They sat in comfortable silence as the sun sank lower, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson. One of their grandsons ran up to the porch, demanding that Grandpa come see something immediately important. Asher rose with a laugh, allowing himself to be tugged toward whatever adventure awaited. Lily watched him go, this man who had changed her life with a single act of standing up for what was right. She thought about the girl she had been, desperate and angry and determined not to be crushed by a world that valued her less than she was worth. That girl could never have imagined this future, this abundance of love and family and purpose. The fight for fair wages at a lumber mill in Tascosa had been about more than just money. It had been about dignity and worth, and the principle that honest work deserved honest pay regardless of who performed it. Asher had understood that instinctively, had recognized that what was at stake went far beyond $8 versus $16. By standing up to Hutchins, he had not just gotten Lily the money she was owed. He had shown her that there were people in the world who would fight for justice even when it did not directly benefit them. He had demonstrated through action, rather than just words, that she had value as a person, not just as a worker. And he had given her the chance to build a life on her own terms, as an equal partner rather than a subordinate. From that foundation of respect and fairness, everything else had grown. Their love, their family, their success, all of it traced back to that moment when Asher had decided that what Hutchins was doing was wrong and needed to be corrected. It was a small act in the grand scheme of things, confronting one dishonest mill owner in one small Texas town. But for Lily, it had been everything. As twilight deepened into full dark and the stars began to appear, the family gradually made their way inside for dinner. The homestead that had once housed just 2 people now rang with the voices of 3 generations, all of them connected by the love and courage of 2 people who had found each other when they needed it most. Lily helped her daughters-in-law prepare the meal while Asher entertained the grandchildren with stories of his mountain man days. The house was full of warmth and life, and the particular kind of joy that comes from being surrounded by people you love and who love you in return. After dinner, after the children had been put to bed and the adults had lingered over coffee and conversation, Lily and Asher finally retreated to their own room. They prepared for bed with the easy synchronization of people who had shared space for decades, moving around each other without getting in the way. As they lay down together, Asher pulled Lily close, and she rested her head on his shoulder in the way that had become second nature over their years together. "Thank you," she said softly into the darkness. "For what?" "For seeing me when no one else did. For fighting for me when I could not fight for myself. For building this life with me. For everything." "You do not need to thank me," Asher replied, echoing what he had said so many years ago in Tascosa. "You earned everything you have. I just made sure you got what you deserved." "We earned it together," Lily corrected. "Everything good in my life came from the partnership we built, from the way we have always faced challenges together as equals." Asher kissed the top of her head. "I love you, Lily Erickson. I loved you when you were a fierce young woman fighting for fair pay. And I love you now as the mother of my children and the partner of my life. That has never changed and never will." "I love you too," Lily whispered. "Always." They drifted off to sleep in each other's arms, secure in the knowledge that they had built something that would last. The homestead would pass to their children and then to their grandchildren, but more than land and buildings, they were leaving a legacy of integrity and fairness and the kind of love that transforms lives. In the morning, Lily would wake to find Asher already up and making coffee, as he had done nearly every day of their marriage. She would join him in the kitchen, and they would talk about the day ahead while the house slowly came to life around them. It was ordinary and routine, this life they had built, but it was also extraordinary in the way that any life built on love and respect is extraordinary. The mill owner in Tascosa had paid her half what he paid the men, seeing her as less valuable, less deserving, less worthy of fair compensation. The mountain man had made sure she got every penny owed, not because he expected anything in return, but because it was the right thing to do. And from that simple act of standing up for justice, a whole life had unfolded. Years later, when Lily was an old woman and Asher had passed peacefully in his sleep at the age of 78, she would sit on that same porch and tell her great-grandchildren the story of how their great-grandfather had been the kind of man who fought for what was right, even when it was not easy or convenient. She would tell them about the importance of treating people fairly and standing up against injustice wherever you found it. And she would tell them that love built on a foundation of mutual respect and equality was the kind of love that lasted forever, that grew stronger with time rather than fading. She would want them to know that their great-grandparents' story was not just a romance, but a testament to the power of integrity and courage. But on this night, with Asher's arms around her and their family sleeping safe under their roof, Lily did not think about the future or the past. She simply existed in the present moment, grateful for every choice and circumstance that had led her to this place, to this man, to this life. She had come to Tascosa desperate and alone, and she had found everything she needed and more in the form of a mountain man who had seen her worth when others did not. The fight for fair pay had been about justice, but it had also been about something deeper, about recognizing the fundamental human dignity that every person deserves, regardless of their circumstances. Asher had understood that from the beginning, had acted on that understanding, and had shown Lily what it meant to be truly valued. From that beginning, they had built a love story for the ages, one that would be told and retold in their family for generations to come. It was a story about courage and integrity, about standing up for what is right even when the cost is high. But most of all, it was a story about love, the kind of love that transforms not just two lives, but ripples outward to touch everyone it encounters. As Lily's breathing deepened and she drifted into sleep, she smiled, content in the knowledge that she had lived a good life with a good man. The mill owner had tried to cheat her, had tried to diminish her worth and profit from her desperation, but the mountain man had made sure she got every penny owed, and in doing so had given her something far more valuable than money. He had given her dignity, partnership, and a love that would last until the end of her days and beyond. It was everything she had never dared to dream of back in those desperate days in Tascosa. And it was more than enough.